Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. I'm Andy Lin, Vice President of Strategy and Innovation here at Mark III Systems. We are an NVIDIA healthcare competency partner, and today our topic is going to be all around healthcare, AI, and the data center of the future, and specifically what the next generation of healthcare looks like. Today, our guest speaker is Rory Kelleher with NVIDIA. Rory is a global business lead for healthcare and life sciences at NVIDIA, and is responsible for building strategic relationships throughout the industry, whether it be pharma, healthcare research, and also on the payer side as well. Before I introduce Rory, just wanted to go through a couple housekeeping items. First of all, if you have any questions, feel free to ask them in the chat window at the bottom of the screen, and I'll make sure that Rory is asked the question. Or feel free to reach out to myself directly via chat, and we'll make sure to get your questions addressed. Also, we'll have a drawing for an NVIDIA Shield TV Pro as part of attending this webinar. And if you are the winner, we'll make sure we contact you after the webinar itself. So without further ado, I wanted to go ahead and turn it over to Rory, who'll be walking you through today's session. Rory, all yours.
All right. Thank you, Andy. Appreciate it. Hopefully everyone can see my screen. And thank you everyone for attending. Again, my name is Rory Kelleher. I'm a global industry business development lead for healthcare and life sciences here at NVIDIA. And our mission in healthcare here at NVIDIA is to bring all of the innovation, all of the drastic changes that are taking place in artificial intelligence across a variety of different industries, and see how we can bring them to drive value throughout the healthcare industry. And so I figured I'd share a little bit today about both NVIDIA's view, but this really is a shared view around how artificial intelligence is going to be changing healthcare as we know it, to drive better outcomes, reduce overall cost, and deliver better insights and medical research to the community. So really, there's three main trends that are transforming healthcare today. First, obviously, is artificial intelligence. AI is coming at healthcare from all angles. I think most profoundly is what's taking place in imaging today. 70% of all imaging research is being driven by deep learning. That's a figure coming out of McKay, which is one of the most established medical imaging conferences around the world. There's also billions and billions of dollars in VC funding that is going into organizations that have kind of positioned themselves at the intersection of drug discovery and artificial intelligence. And we'll talk a little bit about how drug discovery is going to be completely transformed by the use of computing and artificial intelligence. A second major trend, obviously, is the Internet of Medical Things. I think we're all familiar with IoT as a major trend. I think by 2025, we're going to see over 1 trillion connected devices. And obviously, that's going to have a profound effect on healthcare to see how we can take all these connected devices, provide better information to physicians or technicians so that they can drive better outcomes and reduce the overall cost of healthcare delivery. Anytime, like in our own country, where you've got healthcare costs driving as much as 18 or 20% of GDP, there's huge opportunities for improvement there. And then the third trend that is transforming healthcare as we see it is in edge computing. And so this could be anything from smart hospitals all the way to computing things in real time. We think this is going to be a even bigger trend than cloud computing. And a lot of this is going to be made possible by edge computing and 5G. So NVIDIA is taking significant strides in this space to think about how we manage, deploy, and support very large fleets of edge computing devices in a manner that's as easy as pushing an application out to a mobile phone. So how is NVIDIA contributing to this space? Well, everything that NVIDIA does starts with a single architecture. That's our GPU architecture. And because this GPU is both highly parallel, which means it can deliver a lot of performance for applications that can be executed in parallel, but also highly programmable, it allows us to become a full stack company in that we're able to program or build domain-specific applications across a variety of different industries. So in self-driving cars, we've developed an entire application framework that we refer to as Drive. In robotics, we've got something similar that we refer to as Isaac. And in healthcare, our computational platform for healthcare, we refer to as CLARA. And CLARA is meant to help developers build both accelerated and intelligent applications across a number of different domains within healthcare itself. Obviously in imaging, which we'll talk a little bit about today, certainly in genomics, where NVIDIA made a small acquisition of a scientific company called Parabricks, which does GPU accelerated GATK, among other things in genomic analysis pipelines, and certainly in turning sensors within hospitals into smart sensors. The other thing that's not noted here is something that we just recently announced at our GTC conference 2 weeks ago, which is CLARA Discovery, and that is aimed towards transforming drug discovery through the use of both computational tools and artificial intelligence. So let's talk a little bit about how both imaging and instruments are going to be transformed by AI. Then I'm going to transition into smart hospitals, and finally we'll wrap up with drug discovery. So NVIDIA has been working with instrument companies for greater than the last decade. Many of them had been using NVIDIA GPUs for high performance computing needs, in this case, like accelerating or reconstructing raw sensor data into an interpretable image that a radiologist could actually could read themselves. And that was a pretty significant and a pretty computationally demanding task. Obviously, GPUs have been known for visual computing for quite some time as well. And we've seen great strides in driving cinematic and realistic imaging, whereas if you get a sonogram, it might not necessarily just be a 2D black and white picture anymore, but you can get a very realistic image of your unborn baby, which is just a beautiful thing. And we're actually seeing other applications where there's real clinical value being driven from these very realistic imaging capabilities where you can actually see into the body. But everything is being changed by artificial intelligence. We're seeing all of the major instrument companies start to build their strategies and now deliver FDA approved AI algorithms. I think upwards of 100 are now FDA approved today. And what we're working with instrument companies on is not just their AI strategy, but how they can move these instruments to being both software defined and AI enabled across the entire workflow. And so to draw an analogy, if you take a look at an industry outside of healthcare, take autonomous vehicles, the thing that really makes Tesla interesting isn't the fact that they've developed a better electric car or electric motor than anyone, but rather they've created a platform that can grow in value over time. Whereas they can deliver new capabilities, new features, oftentimes that are AI features in the case of full self-driving, so that over time the value of that vehicle actually accrues for the end user. And so that's what we're working with instrument companies on, is new business models, new capabilities, so that the instrument is no longer fixed in its ability to deliver value, but it can actually continue to improve over time. That's the whole concept of being both software defined and AI enabled, all of which is made possible by NVIDIA's end-to-end GPU architecture, where you've essentially got a computer that is training and building the AI and a computer at the edge that is executing that AI. And frankly, it can be a variety of different AI tasks. And then NVIDIA's tools to help both imaging researchers and instrument companies in medical imaging to build artificial intelligence is CLARA Imaging. And this is an application framework that we've been working on for many years to help transform radiology with AI. If you think about some of the challenges in building and deploying artificial intelligence in a clinical setting. That is what CLARA is made to address. So first, if you're building good AI, you must have good data, well annotated data, because this gold standard of training data essentially becomes your source code for your artificial intelligence. But the challenge of getting good and well annotated data sets is it's both time consuming or expensive, or in many cases both. And so our research team, our applied research team here at NVIDIA, actually spend a lot of time thinking about how we can use artificial intelligence to accelerate the process of annotating data. And so we've effectively created an API-driven server that uses pre-trained models to help with the process of annotation. And then if you think about training, a lot of the open source tools today were originally built with like natural scene type use cases for, say, self-driving or just traditional image recognition. They are certainly not optimized for dealing with the types of data sets that you see in healthcare, and certainly not for medical imaging. And so from a training standpoint, we've effectively built a number of domain-specific tools to help you with either pre-training or just accelerated training, because it comes up with it is built in with a number of the different commonly used operations in medical imaging. We also have tools like federated learning and transfer learning, so that you don't have to bring all of your data to one source to be able to do your training, but rather you can bring the models to the data and do privacy preserving learning at the edge that will drive better accuracy across a number of different sites. And then, of course, building all these AI models means nothing if we don't ever get them into production where they're aiding a physician or helping identify things within a patient. And so our CLARA application framework for deployment effectively helps you to easily stitch together applications so that you can get these into the clinical workflow with limited effort on your part. We effectively take care of a lot of the underlying software engineering for you. So really exciting times in radiology, and we believe that this is going to expand beyond radiology and into other imaging modalities like pathology and beyond. So let's talk a little bit about smart hospitals. And smart hospitals can mean a bunch of different things to a bunch of different people, but at NVIDIA, we think about being able to take video as a sensor and microphones as a sensor and connect them up to a GPU computer that has trained models on it. And so these sensors effectively become your eyes and ears within the hospital, connected to a brain, an NVIDIA GPU computer with trained models that allow you to do a variety of different tasks. COVID has certainly been an accelerator for the use of video within hospitals. If you think about the use cases like body temperature screening, remote patient monitoring, safe social distancing, and contact tracing, all of these can be driven by well-placed cameras and well-trained models that can help identify some of these risks and keep patients within the hospital safe. But I think what's really interesting about these smart hospital use cases is once that infrastructure is in there, say for a COVID use case, it can now be transformed by training new models to address things like never events within hospitals. Never events are things like never should a patient fall, never should you operate on the wrong limb, never should you prescribe or give medicine to the wrong patient within the hospital. And so if we use video as a sensor to identify and notice these things before they happen, there becomes a real financial benefit, because every time, in the case of fall prevention, every time somebody falls within a hospital, it costs a hospital anywhere between $30,000 and $50,000. So being able to reduce that has a very quick return on investment and ultimately delivers better care to the patients. And so CLARA Guardian, much like what we saw with CLARA Imaging, is our tool to help developers quickly build these capabilities on NVIDIA's platform. And we've been working with an entire ecosystem of independent software vendors that are swarming this industry because there's absolute needs and significant financial opportunities within smart sensors in hospitals. And so CLARA Guardian is a collection of different tools to help with the, again, development and the deployment process of AI within the hospital. So it's a collection of pre-trained models, in this case, speech models, posed estimation models for predicting patient falls or identifying when somebody starts to move and try and get out of bed when maybe they shouldn't be. There's some incredible work for heart rate estimation, which seriously has, I'm kind of blown away by this use case. Just from a video, you can actually estimate somebody's heart rate, which is going to completely transform how vitals are collected within the hospital. And then gesture models. So say you've got somebody who can't speak but can gesture, there's opportunities, to drive improved patient experiences through the use of video. There's also tools like data collection tools and sample applications so that you can collect the necessary data to improve your models or build specific models. And then sample applications will help you, get started quickly by giving you a starting point on how to build some of these applications. So let's talk about drug discovery. This is, in my opinion, maybe some of the most exciting work. I think we all understand that time is our enemy in terms of developing a therapy for COVID. But the reality is, pharma's grand challenge is it takes billions of dollars and 10+ years to bring a drug to market. And for several decades now, pharma has been battling against this concept of EROOM'S law, which is the exponential decline in drug discovery R&D productivity. And that's despite us throwing much more money and many more intelligent headcount at these types of problems. And the other interesting trend here is that we are now creating more biomedical data than we ever have in history. And so there's clearly a need for new computational tools and AI tools that are going to help us sift through, make sense of this data, and flip EROOM'S law on its head. And so NVIDIA at our recent GTC conference made an announcement of CLARA Discovery, which is our initiative to help reverse EROOM'S law and accelerate the process and reduce the cost of drug discovery through both artificial intelligence and GPU computing. And so if just from a very high level, think about the concept of drug discovery, I personally break it down in just a few different areas. Number one is you have to understand the causal biology. And so tools like genomics and what NVIDIA is doing in Parabricks is essential to getting an understanding of that biology. And then being able to use tools like CryoSpark and Relion, which are cryo-electron microscopy codes to help understand the structure of a particular protein. We're showing the COVID protein here, are super helpful in being able to understand what type of drugs we have to build that will actually bind and dock to the structure of this particular protein. So once we understand the causal biology, then we have to pour on the chemistry. And what's crazy about the chemistry space is that it's effectively an intractable problem. And the more compute you throw at the problem, the more drugs you can effectively screen. Someone told me once that the chemical space is 10 to the 60th. That means there are more potential molecules than there are known atoms in the universe. So it is a massively, massively huge problem. And so from anything from search to docking to simulating how these molecules will actually bind with a particular protein, there's a number of different applications that are either open source, academic, or commercial third-party tools that NVIDIA has been working with over the past decade to not only optimize, but now we're helping to package these up and make them really frictionless for folks to be able to use either in the cloud or on-prem in their own data centers. And then two additional tools that are used throughout the drug discovery process are imaging, and we already talked about NVIDIA's work in CLARA imaging, specific with radiology data, and as I mentioned, coming in pathology, which is really important for identifying biomarkers. And then natural language processing is really going through an incredible moment. And it's used in both kind of the tail end of drug discovery, where you're extracting relevant information from clinical notes, but also early on, where you're trying to identify a target ID of a particular disease, and you might want to mine through troves of biomedical literature data, in some cases hundreds of millions of documents. Being able to have a search tool and kind of a knowledge graph that's driven by underlying natural language processing techniques is a huge advantage for pharma. Two additional announcements that kind of encapsulate what's going on in the pharma space with NVIDIA. We announced that we are actually building the United Kingdom's largest supercomputer that we call Cambridge One, and we're dedicating it to healthcare research. And so some of our early partners are groups like AstraZeneca, GSK, King's College London, the NHS, and Oxford Nanopore. And we're likely going to be working with a number of different other players across the healthcare ecosystem. And it's really meant to be a tool for, let's say, needle mover AI projects. Groundbreaking research that would otherwise take years for folks to be able to approach. We aim to try and accelerate that with Cambridge One, which is essentially a DGX superpod, a product NVIDIA offers that is an AI data center in a box, fully optimized with all the necessary software, pre-validated, pre-tested, so that you can get instant productivity on some of your hardest AI challenges. And the second announcement that we made is a partnership with GSK, which is one of the world's leading drug discovery companies. And we're going to be working directly with them, co-locating some of our scientists and building on-premise AI infrastructure to focus on things like pathology and genomics to help drive the next generation of drug discovery. I wanted to continue some of the conversations around natural language processing, because I really believe that NLP is going through its renaissance moment, very similar to what computer vision was going through, 7 or 8 years ago, where we are now seeing modern day deep learning architectures being able to provide superhuman level capabilities in a variety of natural language processing tasks. And what we've also learned here is that domain-specific trained models beat generic models, which is understandable, right? Like if you just train a large natural language processing model on the entire corpus of Wikipedia, it's going to be pretty good at a number of different general tasks. But if you throw, say, drug discovery specific tasks or questions at it, it's probably going to struggle. But if you train from scratch a model on biomedical related corpus, chances are, and we've actually proven this, that performance is going to be significantly greater for the domain that you're operating in. So I'll share a little bit about some of the breakthrough technology that NVIDIA is making available to the industry. So we released a pre-trained model called NVIDIA BioMegatron, which is a very large transformer type model that is pre-trained on PubMed data. And so it is particularly good, state-of-the-art performance good, at a variety of different tasks. For named entity recognition, where you might want to identify a type of medicine or a name of a disease, relation extraction, so you can understand the relation between those entities, which is really important in speech, and then question and answering, so that you can ask of an entire corpus of data, what genes are expressed in this type of disease. And so you can see how this can be a really useful tool for researchers that are trying to get, trying to sift through, and oftentimes millions of different data points, so that they can glean insights faster than they would be able to on their own. And so we've talked about a variety of different tools today, from imaging to genomics to smart sensors to drug discovery to natural language processing. If any of this is interesting for you, if you're thinking in the back of your head, I've got a project in one of these domains and I'd really love to get started, I think the best place that you can go to is NVIDIA GPU Cloud, NGC. You can go to ngc.nvidia.com. And this effectively is a container repository, but really it's so much more than that, because we've got all of our optimized software, all of our pre-trained models, all of our application frameworks, all of our example workflows, packaged up and made available to you in NGCs so that you don't have to start from scratch. You've got a place where you can get started quickly. And there's this concept of collections that make it really easy for folks that are interested in a particular domain. So if you're interested in, say, drug discovery, you can go to the CLARA Discovery Collection, and all of the related assets are going to be listed out there for you so that you can pull down that container, pull down that model, pull down that sample Jupyter notebook, and get started really, really quickly on your particular problem. And so I just wanted to share with you a little bit about NVIDIA's perspective on how we believe healthcare is going to change. We couldn't be more excited. I know NVIDIA has been working on healthcare for greater than 10 years, and we really believe and see that all of these technologies and all of these opportunities are coming to a head, oftentimes driven by both artificial intelligence and new capabilities in computing brought to you by NVIDIA. So I've got my email here. If any of this is interesting or you think would be helpful, feel free to shoot me an email, and I will stop here and toss it back to Andy to see if we've got any questions.
Awesome, Rory. Thank you. We do have a question here, it looks like. Within natural language, what do you think are the most exciting opportunities specifically within healthcare? I know it looks like you kind of did a walkthrough, but obviously you see what folks are actually doing out there. What are some of the exciting applications you're seeing that people are exploring now?
So I talked about one, which is the use of natural language processing to mine through hundreds of millions of scientific literature for drug discovery. Another one that I'm really excited about is, it's not just mining through text data, but also speech. So if you think about, I don't know if anyone here has had a doctor's appointment recently, but chances are you didn't go to the hospital. You probably had a telemedicine call. And if you think about kind of the opportunities to transform the patient and doctor interaction and experience, oftentimes when I would go in person to a doctor's appointment, I would be sitting on the table and the doctor would be facing their computer asking me questions. And so it kind of feels impersonal. But now if you've either got some type of technology in the exam room, or you've got a telemedicine exchange taking place, you can have an AI capture that speech, translate it into text, extract the necessary information out of that conversation, put it into the EHR. And so you've now got a much more human experience between a doctor and a patient, as opposed to the doctor just rambling a list of questions, looking back at their computer to fill it in directly because they know they've got to get to their next appointment in no less than 10 minutes. And so I think there's awesome opportunities for telemedicine to be transformed by artificial intelligence, and specifically some of the new state-of-the-art natural language processing techniques.
Awesome. Thank you for that answer. One more question. For organizations that are just sort of getting started, and I know this is a question that you get a lot. We help a lot of clients out just as a partner on this front. Maybe they have a lot of data, but they're trying to really get reoriented and try to apply some of these AI-driven techniques to sort of solving old problems. What are some just generic tips that you've that you would give organizations to get further down the path?
Sure. I think number one is don't try and do it alone, right? Find a partner, whether it be a large technology company, an integrator, a consulting organization that has done it before, knows the pitfalls, knows how to drive value, and can help you build a roadmap, not only of where you're going to start today, but what artificial intelligence strategy looks like for your organization over the next 3 to 5 years. Because I truly believe the decisions organizations make now are as important, if not more important, than the decisions we made when the internet was born. And you can completely see how that transformed business opportunities for a variety of different folks. And then from there, I would say, data strategy is probably number one. You have to understand how you're collecting, organizing, labeling all of your data, because again, your data becomes your source code. In the age of artificial intelligence and deep learning, it is software that writes software. You don't have a programmer who's looking through trying to identify the features within that data per se. You've got a computer that is understanding the features of that data on its own through the process of training that in turn develops ideally a high performing model. And that only happens with good data. And then the last thing I'll say is infrastructure matters. I think for a long time, especially in IT organizations and maybe all the way up to the executive ranks, infrastructure was really seen as a commodity. I think these days, infrastructure absolutely is a competitive differentiator. And we're going to see in drug discovery and healthcare, in every industry, the organizations that figure out their data strategy do believe that infrastructure is a competitive differentiator and invest in that infrastructure and that data strategy to create the artificial intelligence to automate particular processes. Those are the organizations that are going to be the winners.
All right, perfect. Well, it looks like that was the last question that we had for this session. So I wanted to thank you, Rory, for spending the time and speaking to our incredible audience. And for any of you guys out there, if you guys have any follow-up questions, feel free to send us a note or reply back to the invitation for this webinar. And like I mentioned earlier, we'll have a winner for the drawing that we'll draw at the end of the session, and we'll contact you directly. I want to thank everyone for your time and have a great day.
Thank you.